Hello, this is a general information session about Social Justice Fund Northwest's grants. So in this conversation today, you'll learn more information about just general information about our grant making process and tips about how to strengthen your applications and proposals for our existing funding opportunities. So we'll go to the next slide. Our agenda for this conversation will be some overview and context about SJF, and about our mission and our focus on community organizing. Then we'll share and go into some nuts and bolts about SJF's grant making, some key elements, information about our eligibility. Then we'll share about our application process, evaluation, and scoring process. Then we'll move into some funding opportunities and we'll talk a little bit about our application tips and tips we have for the proposals that you all submit to us. Next slide, please. So the overview and context. Social Justice Fund Northwest is a foundation working at the front lines of social change. We leverage the resources of our members to foster significant long-term social justice solutions throughout Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Washington, and Wyoming, our 5-state region. Our primary grant-making focus is to support grassroots, community-based organizations that use community organizing to achieve their goals. We give the highest priority to organizations representing communities who have suffered from a historical pattern of oppression and discrimination, resulting in impoverishment, vulnerability to abuse and economic exploitation, continuing social prejudice, and or just outright disenfranchisement. We prioritize these groups because we believe that addressing the extreme injustices they have faced demands the most broad-reaching reforms and social transformations with the most far-reaching political, economic, and social impacts. Why we focus on community organizing? Well, community organizing is not generally supported by mainstream philanthropy. Even progressive funders often avoid funding grassroots groups because they either lack the capacity to make and monitor many small grants, or they're just unwilling to face the risks involved in funding smaller grassroots organizations. We at SJF recognize that there are many different approaches to community organizing, and we value a diversity of different tactics in our funding. However, when we talk about community organizing, when we define community organizing, there's a set of characteristics that our grantees share or that we believe community organizing shares. And that's how we make the definition or characterize what is community organizing. So I'll show you those on the next slide. So we evaluate our grants against our community organizing framework, and these 6 characteristics represent that framework. The first one is that the organization or the project must be led by the people most directly affected by the issues the organization is working on. The second is that the project or the org must continually build leadership from within its own membership, base, or community. The third characteristic is that the project and work understands and addresses the root cause of the issues and not just the symptoms of issues. The fourth characteristic is that the project or organization brings people together to build power they would not have individually or alone. And then to use that power that they have built to create systemic change, which includes altering unjust power relations. And then the 6th characteristic of this community organizing framework is that the work of the project or the organization sees itself as part of a larger movement for social change and work towards strengthening that movement with their work. So a little bit more about SJF's grant making. Our grants span a wide variety of issues and invest in some of the most under-resourced and innovative organizations making effective social change. Our members recognize that community organizing takes time and that the benefits of funding this strategy far outweigh the risks of funding this strategy. So the below is true are like some key elements that are true about almost all of SJF's grant making. The first is that our funding decisions are made through a democratic process by volunteer grant makers facilitated by the SJF grant making team. The second is that these grant makers who are in this democratic process are selected based on a diversity of factors like their activism, their community involvement, any lived professional or volunteer experience they have with an issue area of a grant cycle. Another element about our grant making is that the majority of our grants are for general operating funds, which provide grantees the greatest degree of flexibility and self-determination, in our opinion. We focus on funding particular issue areas that our members and grantees tell us are the highest priority of concern for them. So this year we had a funding cycle focused specifically on immigration justice work because our members and our grantees told us that's where they wanted money to move from us this year. Special consideration is given to groups led by Black, Indigenous, or communities of color. This reflects our organizational commitment to combat racism by building political power in communities of color. We also fund groups committed to Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty. Among organizations with primarily white constituencies in leadership, our grant-making process funds those who intentionally participate in anti-racist organizing, tactics, or principles, and put those into their work, and how they do their organizing and projects. We aim to distribute funds broadly throughout our region, and while most of our funding criteria seems to advantage urban organizations, we give special consideration to rural groups.
SJF does not fund individuals, endowments, funds, or capital campaigns. We also do not fund general operating requests from organizations that primarily provide direct services to individuals and families. Direct service organizations can apply for project-specific funds for projects that fit our definition of community organizing, meaning it's okay for an organization that's doing direct service work to apply for funding, but the funding that they're applying for must be for a community organizing project that fits our community organizing framework. Publications, we also do not fund publications, reports, workshops, classes, conferences, media events, art, theater productions, research, or litigation efforts unless they are part of an ongoing community organizing effort, which again meets our community organizing framework. SJF also does not fund environmental work unless it is aimed at achieving social justice goals. For example, environmental justice. SJF generally will not fund recycling or resource conservation projects, but we do fund community organizing projects addressing environmental threats that disproportionately harm communities of color or low-income communities. SJF also does not fund projects sponsored by a government agency. For example, SJF will not fund a project led by a public school district, but we might fund a project led by communities of color that partners with public schools to address the opportunity gap for students of color. The project must be community-driven and led by those most directly affected by the problem. Now I'm going to share a little bit about our application and evaluation process. Our application questions are generally divided into three categories: the org info, the narrative, and the attachments. The org info is not evaluated. This is just basic information that we need about a grantee. This includes the org name, the contact info, the budget, your mission, and a summary of your grant request, your fiscal status, and your fiscal sponsor information if you have a fiscal sponsor. We will fund C3 and C4 organizations, or we will fund organizations that have a fiscal sponsor, which is a C3 or C4. If your organization is still looking for a fiscal sponsor, you can still apply. And we just ask you to confirm that fiscal sponsor information if you are awarded funds. The second part of the application is the narrative. This is the bulk of the application, and this is the part that's read and scored by our grant community panel of grant makers. This usually includes 8 to 11 questions connected to our community organizing framework. And you must address how your work is meeting all 6 of the community organizing framework characteristics. The third section are the attachments. We require 2 attachments with each application. One is the diversity chart, and the second is the fiscal letter. The diversity chart shows evaluators which identities are represented in the organization. The organization should list out board and staff. There are also spaces for volunteers and members, although that section is optional. Organizations with the opportunity to share demographic information like race, gender, and age categories must be filled out. This is how we know that you are led by the people that are most impacted by the issue area. So in your narrative, there'll be a question about that, and you'll identify the community that you're working with. And this is where you give us your governing body and staff breakdown of race and ethnicity and other demographics so that we can look at this and ensure that you are being led by the folks that you've identified. Some organizations may include other identifying categories at the bottom of the application, such as immigrants, criminal justice impacted, farm workers, etc. You have space under section 4 to write that in. This chart is used to help evaluate whether the most impacted are in leadership and present throughout your organization, at least 51%. The second attachment is a fiscal letter. Please upload a letter confirming your fiscal status. This is the 501c3 or 501c4 determination letter from the IRS, or a fiscal sponsorship agreement or a letter from your fiscal sponsor confirming that they are indeed in a fiscal sponsorship relationship with your organization. If your organization is a C4, grant funds from SJF cannot be used for lobbying or endorsing an elected official. And of course, like I said before, if you are an org without a fiscal sponsor, please apply for funding. Grant funds will not be distributed until we've received a signed fiscal sponsorship agreement, but that does not prevent you from actually applying. Social justice, now I'm going to talk a little bit about how grant applications are evaluated. Social justice fund staff do an initial screening to evaluate whether a proposal demonstrates that the work fits SJF's community organizing framework. Once proposals are reviewed by staff for eligibility, grant makers evaluate proposals based on how well they fit the community organizing framework. After evaluating applications, grant makers come together and make award decisions using a democratic process. Groups with the least amount of consensus among evaluators are given the most time for consideration in grant deliberation meetings.
So I'll share a bit more about the funding opportunities we have available for this year that we have left, it's still available for this year. The first is our Emerging Justice Fund. It is a 1-year grant of $10,000. The deadline is rolling throughout the rest of this year. Our last and final deadline this year is September 12th. The Emerging Justice Fund will move unrestricted funds to resource grassroots organizing work to combat emergent issues for communities that have been and continue to be targeted by federal, state, and local policies. So we have one more cycle of this funds to distribute for this year. Our seed grant is a one-time grant of $5,000. We're doing this quarterly this year. The remaining deadline for our seed grant in 2025 is September 4th. Seed grants provide small, unrestricted funds to new groups who are in the early stages of building their community organizing work. When we say new, we mean 3 years or younger, but who do not quite yet meet all of SJF's community organizing criteria and may not yet qualify for our regular grants. So what's important to understand about our seed grant is that maybe you are new to trying to get your organizing work going, or you have a project that's more organizing work than what your typical work is that is direct service. The seed grant might be a great place for you to put in a submission if the work is 3 years or younger, and either tell us how it's organizing work or how it is intended to be or will be organizing work once it gets going. Something else to know about the seed grant: if you've gotten another grant from Social Justice Fund, you are ineligible for the seed grant. So you can only apply for the seed grant if you have not been funded by us before. Sponsorships, we have an annual sponsorship of $1,000. Our sponsorship committee makes those decisions on a rolling basis, about monthly. We use sponsorship at SJF as a way of building bridges. We hope that organizations will use the sponsorship resource to fund their most ambitious, innovative projects that are often not supported by other funders. If you are not currently an SJF grantee or haven't received a grant from us in over 5 years, sponsorship is a great way to try to get more connected with this organization. Next, we have our Mountain West Community Organizing Grant. This is a 2-year grant totaling $50,000, so $25,000 a year. We launched this grant in July. The deadline for this grant is August 14th, 2025. SJF's grant making spans a 5-state region, like we mentioned earlier: Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Washington, and Wyoming, with a significant portion of our resources moved to large urban metropolitan centers like Seattle and Portland. So this grant cycle will support community organizing that builds grassroots power in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and the Mountain West portion of Oregon, and will give priority to organizations in rural, small town, and reservation communities. A couple of little tips. So we've been doing quite a few rounds of our funding this year, and so we've been seeing some small, just some consistent things that have come up, and so we wanted to take a moment to give you some application tips about how to strengthen your proposals. The first one related to our Emerging Justice Fund is that the Emerging Justice Fund functions as a rapid response opportunity. So in that proposal, you must clarify and be clear what is the emerging justice or urgent need that your org or project is trying to respond to. Without that, your application is likely going to be screened out. This grant was intended to be able to fund and resource folks responding to the attacks on marginalized communities, not to just sustain existing work. So just something to be thinking about with that proposal. For the seed proposal, just a reminder, I said it in the explanation, the work needs to be 3 years or younger. So if the project or work was from 2022 or forward, then that would fit the criteria of 3 years or younger for this year's seed awards. And then also in the seed application, we asked that if you're not meeting a particular part of our community organizing framework, then please just characterize how you do intend to meet that with your project or your work. We understand, and specifically this grant cycle and grant funding opportunity is supposed to be seeding money into some new organizing work. So we understand that you might not be there yet. So it will be important for you to just characterize in your application how you intend to get there, because that's how we help make decisions around where the funding might go. For a Mountain West organizing grant, all funding, all $500,000 that we intend to put into the community around Mountain West organizing, to support organizing in those regions, will be spent in the Mountain West region. So they do not submit a proposal for work if that work is not happening all in the Mountain West region. And then for sponsorship, just a reminder that you must meet SJF's community organizing framework. If you're asking for sponsorship, it's still our intention to fund and move resources to folks that are doing organizing work. So please, when you're submitting your application, just characterize how you meet our community organizing framework. And then if questions come up, make sure you contact info. Sorry, let me pause. In the grant portal, please make sure your contact information for your organization is accurate. We use whatever information you put in the portal to send grants and to submit grant agreements, so we know who's the signature for things. So it's super important to us because that's our source of truth, that your contact information is correct. So feel free just to pop your eyes on there before you submit anything, just to make sure it's accurate. And if for some reason it's not, or you're having issues updating issues updating it, please feel free at any point to reach out to our team. And then as Moose discussed a little bit earlier, a fiscal letter or fiscal sponsorship agreement is or something that we request attached to your application. If you don't have one, you can let us know that you're in the process of looking for one. We can't move funding quite yet to your work until you have given us a fiscal letter or have a fiscal sponsorship agreement. So feel free to reach out to us if you need any more clarity or conversation or support related to that. And then Moose also dug in a little bit about the diversity chart. A reminder that both the question in the application and the attached diversity chart is how we assess whether or not your project or org is led by those most impacted. So if you're in the process of your diversity chart and that's confusing, please also feel free to reach out to us because we're happy to have one-on-one conversations to help make sense of what we're asking for with that diversity chart. And then our grant making team has been trying to just be better at pulling forward resources and making them more accessible for folks related to our grant making. So we have a helpful links for applying to our grants on here. The first one, it will take you to our website of our open funding opportunities. The second, Foundant login page. Foundant is the grant making portal we use for all of our grant making. This link takes you directly to SJF's grant portal for grant submissions and reports, and not the general Foundant page. So that's a super important link for your grant making with us. The grant information and application page in Foundant, you can click there to just begin your application. If for some reason you don't have an account, it'll take you to the page before that to set up an account, and you can follow those instructions. For logging in to Foundant and creating an account, there's a video of instructions, a little tutorial that you can use to support that. And if you're having issues, again, please feel free to reach out to our team. And then we have a little bit more about what and how SJF funds. So a lot of what I just characterized you in this conversation, you can find more information about that. You can check your eligibility and find frequently asked questions about our funding process there. We have a link to past grantee examples so you can see some of the organizing work that we have funded in the past connected to what issue areas. The best way to stay up to date about what's happening with SJF and when we have opportunities available is to sign up for our newsletter. So that link right there will take you to sign up directly to our newsletter. So we encourage folks to do that. And then lastly, we are trying to better organize our work around just language justice and provide access to a language support if needed. And so we've started a document that can help folks if you're looking for support with translations and or if ever you want to bring your own translator to sit down and have a conversation with us, we're happy to do that as well. And then I think just as a final note, we wanted to share that if you're needing to get a hold of our team, please feel free to email grants@socialjusticefund.org. Again, that's grants@socialjusticefund.org. You'll find that all over our website and often littered through a bunch of these resources. So please feel free at any point to reach out to us. And we look forward to seeing your proposals come in. Thank you.